It was a cold evening in the city, the kind of night where the wind whispers secrets only to those willing to listen. The streets were wet from the recent rain, reflecting the dim glow of the flickering streetlights. Somewhere in the heart of it all, inside a luxurious office with glass walls that overlooked the entire skyline, sat a man who believed he had conquered life. Ethan Caldwell was his name, a self-made millionaire, a visionary, and a man who had built his empire from the ground up. He had clawed his way to the top, outsmarting his competitors, making ruthless decisions, and stepping over those who dared to stand in his way. To the world, he was a symbol of success, but to those who knew him personally, he was a storm in human form, unforgiving and relentless. And now, sitting behind his massive oak desk, sipping an expensive glass of whiskey, Ethan smirked as he watched the latest headlines. Caldwell Industries crushes rival corporation in a ruthless takeover. The article detailed how he had single-handedly dismantled a competitor's company, leaving its founder, Michael Hayes, bankrupt and humiliated. Ethan leaned back in his chair, basking in the glory of his latest victory. For years, he had lived by one rule: win at any cost. And so far, life had rewarded him for it. He had wealth, power, and influence. He had won. Or at least, that's what he thought. A fateful encounter. That night, as Ethan left his office, he stepped into his sleek black sports car and sped down the city streets. He was on top of the world. Nothing could touch him. But fate has a way of humbling even the mightiest. As he pulled up to a red light, he noticed a man standing on the sidewalk. At first, he didn't pay much attention, just another nameless face in the city. But then their eyes met. Michael Hayes, the man Ethan had crushed, ruined, and left with nothing. Except Michael wasn't broken. He didn't look like a man defeated. In fact, there was something in his gaze, something unsettling, a quiet confidence, a smirk, even. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. What did this man have to smile about? He had lost everything. Ethan had seen to it himself. The light turned green, and Ethan accelerated, shaking off the encounter. It was nothing, just a bitter man trying to save face. Or so he thought. Cracks in the armor. The following weeks were strange. At first, it was small things. Ethan's stocks fluctuating unexpectedly, minor legal troubles, rumors of internal corruption in his company. He brushed them off. It was normal in the business world. But then, things escalated. A critical deal he had spent months negotiating collapsed overnight. His investors, loyal for years, started pulling out. His most trusted employees began resigning, some even joining rival companies. Then came the lawsuits. Allegations surfaced. Claims of unethical practices, insider trading, and corporate fraud. Ethan dismissed them as fabrications, but they didn't disappear. Instead, they multiplied. It wasn't just his business that was falling apart. His personal life followed suit. His closest allies turned their backs on him. His longtime girlfriend left without warning. Even his family, whom he had neglected in his pursuit of power, refused to take his calls. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt something he had never known before. Fear. The turning point. One evening, sitting alone in his penthouse, Ethan turned on the television. Every channel was talking about him, but not in the way he was used to. Caldwell Empire crumbles, once a business titan, now facing imminent collapse. It was surreal. Just weeks ago, he had been untouchable. And now, he was watching his own downfall play out in real time. And then the interview started. The host introduced the guest, Michael Hayes, the man Ethan had crushed. Calm, composed, and strangely content, Michael spoke with a quiet conviction. Ethan thought he won. He thought he had taken everything from me. But what he didn't understand was that true power isn't about money. It's about resilience. He burned every bridge, thinking he'd never need them again. But life doesn't work that way. Life has a way of balancing things out. Ethan's blood ran cold. When he took everything from me, I had nothing left to lose. But that also meant I had nothing holding me back. So I rebuilt, smarter, stronger. And I watched as he made the same mistakes I once did. The difference? I learned from mine. Ethan's hands trembled. He turned off the TV, staring at the black screen as if it held the answers to his downfall. Michael had been planning this all along. He had played the long game, waiting for the right moment to strike. While Ethan had been celebrating his victory, Michael had been quietly maneuvering the pieces into place. And now, the tables had turned, the edge of despair. Ethan's phone rang, pulling him from his daze. It was his lawyer. "Ethan, we have a problem." That was an understatement. "Another lawsuit?" Ethan muttered, rubbing his temples. There was silence on the other end. Then, the words that shattered everything. "Worse, the feds are investigating you. And there's talk of jail time." For the first time in his life, Ethan felt powerless. He had spent his entire career believing that he was untouchable, that his wealth and influence made him immune to consequences. But life, unpredictable, unforgiving life, had just reminded him of a brutal truth. No one is invincible. And just when you think you've won, life has a way of turning the tables. Ethan Caldwell had built an empire with ruthless precision. He had destroyed his enemies without remorse, believing himself untouchable. But now, the walls were closing in, and for the first time, he was the one with nowhere to run. The news of a federal investigation spread like wildfire. Overnight, his name became synonymous with corporate fraud. The media feasted on every detail. Analysts tore apart his business decisions. Former employees came forward with damning statements, and investors abandoned him as if he carried a plague. Ethan sat in his dimly lit penthouse, staring blankly at the city that once bowed to him. His phone buzzed. Another message from his legal team. He ignored it. He knew what they would say. Prepare for the worst. But what did that even mean? The man who once commanded boardrooms with a single word now found himself drowning in uncertainty. A fall from grace. The first real blow came when the government froze his assets. The money, the fortress he had built to protect himself, was now out of his reach. The luxury cars, the private jet, the multi-million-dollar properties, all under scrutiny. Then the arrest. It happened swiftly. The flashing lights outside his building, the knock on his door, the cold, metallic feel of handcuffs around his wrists. The media had a field day. Images of Ethan Caldwell, once the untouchable business mogul, now a disgraced figure being led into custody, were plastered everywhere. Sitting in an interrogation room, under the sterile glow of the overhead light, Ethan felt the weight of reality pressing down on him. The agent across from him slid a thick file across the table. Fraud, insider trading, tax evasion. The list goes on, the agent said, his voice calm but firm. "You thought you won, Caldwell, but in the end, you were just another man who thought he could outrun the consequences." Ethan clenched his fists. The words stung because, deep down, he knew they were true. Betrayal and isolation. His so-called allies vanished overnight. The men who once toasted his success, the partners who promised unwavering loyalty, none of them answered his calls. They had distanced themselves, eager to save their own reputations. Even his personal assistant, who had been by his side for years, resigned without so much as a farewell. And then, the ultimate betrayal. His closest friend, his right-hand man, Daniel, testified against him in court. Ethan sat in the courtroom, numb, as Daniel took the stand. "He always thought he was invincible," Daniel said, his voice steady. "But I saw what he did. The shortcuts, the manipulations. And I knew one day it would catch up to him." Ethan wanted to scream, to argue, to fight back. But the truth was, Daniel wasn't lying. He had done those things. He had justified them in the name of success. And now, he was paying the price. Rock bottom. Days turned into weeks. The trial dragged on. The judge delivered the verdict. Guilty. Ethan Caldwell, once a titan of industry, was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. As he was led away, the world moved on without him. The empire he had built crumbled in his absence. His assets were seized, his properties auctioned off. And then silence. No phone calls. No visits. No one waiting for him. For the first time in his life, Ethan was truly alone. A flicker of redemption. Prison was a harsh teacher. Stripped of wealth. Stripped of power. He was just another inmate in an orange jumpsuit. No one cared who he had been. At first, he fought against it, resisting, refusing to accept his new reality. But isolation has a way of forcing a man to confront himself. And that's when he met Leon. Leon was an older inmate, a man who had once been like Ethan, powerful, untouchable, until life had humbled him. "You've got two choices," Leon said one day, watching Ethan stare at the walls of his cell. "You can spend the next 5 years being angry at the world, or you can figure out what went wrong and start fixing it." Ethan scoffed. "Fix it? I lost everything." Leon chuckled. "Son, you never had anything real to begin with." Those words haunted Ethan, because deep down, he knew they were true. The rebirth of a man. Prison changed Ethan in ways he never expected. For the first time, he read books, not business strategies, but ones that made him question himself. He exercised, not to impress, but to build discipline. And he listened, truly listened, to the stories of men who had lost far more than he had. Months passed and years. And somewhere along the way, the bitterness faded. Ethan Caldwell, the ruthless businessman, the man who once believed winning was everything, was gone. In his place was a man who had learned a painful but necessary lesson. True success isn't about how high you climb. It's about how well you rise after you fall. Freedom and a new beginning. When Ethan finally walked out of prison, the world was different. He was no longer famous, no longer feared. And yet, for the first time in his life, he felt free. There was no empire to rebuild, no boardrooms to conquer, only the open road ahead. And this time, he wouldn't walk it alone. Because sometimes, life doesn't turn the tables to punish you. Sometimes, it does it to save you. The end.